It seems so abrupt, right? You go through the first stage, you have to play those 7 games. Pacific fought, it came down to the wire, and then just like that, 2 games in the second group, and they're going home.
I felt like they peaked in their. I felt like they peaked at, when Bustos scored the goal to put them into the group stage. You couldn't see them reaching higher heights than that. And I think the difference now between maybe the Calvary and Forge is looking likely to go through now. We'll see what Halifax does in the second game. The difference between those teams at the top, who we feel are likely to go to the championship, is that I still think those teams are on the way up. They haven't peaked yet. They're healthy.
Yeah.
And then Pacific, like I said, I think they peaked when Bustos scored that goal to get them to this stage.
It's not great if you're saying, I think that this team peaked against FC Edmonton, who was already out in the final minutes of a game, and I think that you're right. I don't think we ever saw them. That killer instinct is missing. We talked about it in the pregame show. Cavalry has it. Forge seemed to have it today. I think they got it back a little bit after that game against Wanderers. And Pacific they didn't have it. They didn't have the urgency. For me, they sort of missed the mark in the second round altogether.
Yeah, talking about the urgency is something that we'll get into, but also the discipline, because you can just look at a trend that was starting from the beginning of this tournament for them at the Island Games, and that was giving up penalties in the box, and that essentially did them in again here today. That was the first goal that Forge scored. Jonathan Grant playing up front, using his big body, getting the positioning in on Caden Chung. And I just wonder, it's got to be difficult, Kurt. At some point when you're a team that's now conceded the most, so 6 from the spot, you have to have a moment of here we go again.
Yeah, and I think what we missed in this replay was right before Ancelotti gets on the ball and plays the through ball in behind to Johnny Grant. You see 2 Pacific players converge on Ancelotti Janssen, and they lose the 50-50. We questioned Pacific's compete level in the opening game against Calvary of this group stage. I think that was a moment where it kind of proves my point from last week in that they didn't compete in that moment, which led to the goal. Absolutely a penalty. Caden Chung, we've liked him all tournament, but he's got to know when to stop. The Johnny Grant wins the space. He's got to say, okay, I can't get to this ball. Instead, it's just a little nudge, but it's enough of a nudge that the referee has no choice but to call it.
You say Caden Chung too. We've liked him all tournament. Caden Chung was held back by Grant today. I think that was a good move by Bobby Spiriotis. We really didn't see anything from Sean Young, even though Sean Young is a player that we really love so far. So it's just. Look at these penalty after penalty after penalty. They've got to be more disciplined. You're right. They've got to shake their head and think how. And they're all over the place. You're not necessarily seeing a trend. It's different players. It's different positions on the field. It's flying in sometimes, sometimes a little bit more.
They're not even unfortunate penalties.
No, they're all blatant.
I forgot all of these, and I was thinking, well, maybe we're being a bit harsh. 6 penalties, but maybe some of them were a handball, a deflection here and there. These are bad penalties to give away.
No, this is not a Jake Ruby situation.
And you can't make a championship when you're giving away goals like this.
Yeah, they were full on tackles. They were full on miscues in the box by Pacific. So really no one to blame but themselves in this one. So you can imagine how it just starts to play on your mind where you're playing from behind once again, or, we let the other team into the game once again because of a mistake that we made. Now, this was a team, though, that had, a flair for the offense and that they were creating. They had the top 3 that we keep talking about in Blasco, Diaz, and Bustos, and they had some nice touches, but the numbers don't lie. Even though heading into this game, they led the Island Games with 81 shots, they were converting at just under 14%. And Kurt, something that we had mentioned as well during our halftime show, it seems the decision-making still isn't quite there. Pass when you should shoot, shoot when you should pass.
Yeah, this is one of their better moments of the game. I wondered if Blasco could have just got across Dom Samuel here. This is one of the only knocks on Blasco, is he doesn't have that breakaway pace to separate from a fullback. You need your wingers to be able to get in behind in that moment. But I wondered throughout this game are you starting to see that maybe Pacific going forward right now isn't more than just Bustos? Because Forge clearly had a game plan today to take Bustos out of the game. Laura already mentioned that with the way they set up. I thought Awuwa did an excellent job on the left. They put Johnny Grant in front of him. That contained Bustos. You always saw Kyle Becker sliding over whenever Bustos got on the ball to kind of provide that cover and that double. So we've praised Pacific at times during this tournament, but they also haven't run into Forge other than today and earlier in the tournament. They haven't run into a Forge defense that's really on lockdown and really playing well as a cohesive unit, and they didn't have solutions outside of Bustos.
I think that there's more than just one knock to Blasco. I think that he wasn't as incisive. He didn't take shots. I mean, he's more of a passer than a shooter. And I also think that it was far too easy for them to eliminate Bustos. We knew that game plan going in. We said, Grant Awua is going to be on him. They're going to double team him. And Pacific really didn't do anything to get out of that. I mean, it was pretty obvious what Forge was doing, and they were able to sort of neutralize him. You lay into him a couple of times, you give him a couple of hard tackles, and suddenly he's, I think, in part, sort of mentally out. We hear on the broadcast a number of times saying, there he gets tackled again. Well, he's a small player. That's going to happen. People are going to try and impose their physicality on it. And the good, smaller players are able to jump over those tackles, able to forget them and keep going.
You said something about not being able to play as a cohesive unit, because we're going to get into that, because this is what seems a little tricky when it comes to Pacific. There's so many great individual stories and then not so great stories where they just seem like they couldn't mesh together. We'll get into that in just a second, but first let's hear from their head coach, Pa Maduka.
And Pa, obviously that result does eliminate you from contention for the finals. Where do you think the team came up short today?
We gave everything we had. First of all, I'm very proud of the boys, and these are learning moments. Today we didn't have that finishing touch. We had the possibility to go 1-1 into the break, but the quality was not there. It's the quality today.
Did you feel the decision to award Forge a penalty was the correct one?
I do agree with the penalties we caused, but today, for me, the referees were shambles. It is what it is. For this league further to get better, they need better refereeing. I'm sorry, because the refereeing was not good at all for both teams. Right? It's not a penalty, and then their centre back had the ball on Alessandro Diaz's head, and we get a corner. It's been poor. It's been poor, and today they made it more about themselves than the game, and that is very sad for the league, I must say. That's the truth.
What would you like to see happen going forward to improve
Consistency.
that?
Consistency. Yes, it is. That's the only thing I care, consistency. Certain players can do certain things. Certain players cannot do certain things. Certain team can do certain things. Certain teams cannot do certain things. We get a yellow card. Somebody does something else, they don't get yellow card. So if we see consistency, we fine, right? But allow the players to play. People don't need to make the game about themselves. And sometimes that's what you get when you have unexperienced referees. Simple as that. We all human nature, we make mistakes, but it's not good enough. And they have to hold themselves accountable as much as we hold ourselves accountable.
There has been a lot more positivity around this team than we saw last year. How much progress have you seen on and off the field at this tournament?
We've seen a lot of progress in our team, and we're very proud of the direction we're going. So it's still growth to make, and we're going to continue our growth, and we will never stop. So we learn, this is year 2 for this club. So it's a lot of progress to be made, and but we're superly proud of these boys. I cannot say no more. These boys have been fantastic.
Thank you, Paul.
You're welcome.
So definitely words spoken from a coach who knows his team is going home. He is not happy there, Pa Maduka. We also know that his assistant coach Merriman, I believe, was the one who got the yellow card because they were arguing with the officials. What did you make of his comment of inconsistency?
Probably going to be a fine coming his way. The one thing I could say is I can't be fined for talking about the referees, so I can say whatever I want. I think the refereeing's being good at the tournament. I don't think the refereeing's been a problem. Now then, I'm not on the touch line, so I can't hear maybe how the referee's interacting with players, how the referees are speaking to the bench, because sometimes there can be an issue there, respect this, respect that. But I think overall the refereeing's been pretty good at the tournament, so I disagree with Pa there. What I would say is he might have a point in games when you're playing a team like a Cavalry, who are intent on chopping down your good players, getting on top of you, professional fouls. The last game they played, I think Cavalry outfouled them 2-1. Great, it was a tactic that worked. I would probably deploy that tactic as well if I was Cavalry, but I could see maybe you having a bit of an issue with that in terms of the refereeing. But overall, I think the refereeing's been fine.
Isn't that a story as old as time? You can go to any professional league, you can go to any player who's, more famous than the other, and aren't we still having this conversation where one player can smack another player in the head, gets a red card, But if you're Cristiano Ronaldo at the World Cup and you do it, you don't,
Yeah.
right? I mean, how many times do we have these conversations?
I mean, I think we've talked about this over and over again with Pacific. They're trying to be too cute. Your whole game can't be cute. It has to have a certain element of grit. We wanted to see it before the game. We did not see it. I think that they've been out-fouled. Sometimes you have to have a professional foul. And for me, what stood out on top of what Pa said about the refereeing, which I agree, I thought it was well refereed today, is we gave it all we got. I didn't see any guys at the end of that game who were wrecked.
I think he knows that they went about as far as they could. So, you know, we're not saying the best things about Pacific right now, but I think they achieved about everything they could have at this tournament given their situation.
I disagree. I think that they had other weapons. I think that they had Diaz's. I think that they had Blancos. I think that they had Bustos who could have done more. And I think that they got good performances that they didn't expect from Caden Chung's, from Sean Young's, and those should have been bonuses. And I just don't think that we saw them use their weapons in the way that they should have.
And I disagree with you, obviously, but you know, where's Taryn Campbell? Where's
Yeah.
Noah Verhoeven? These guys who helped them out last year.
Right.
So.
Yes, I was going to say those are when you talk about cohesion, the feel-good stories of Caden Chung and even Bustos coming on over and looking pretty seamless, and Callum Irving replacing Nolan Worth in net, and he looked pretty steady as well. But what happened to Taryn Campbell? What happened to Noah Verhoeven? I mean, these were players who were most definitely a factor last year.
The first thing I noticed about Taryn Campbell when I saw him warming up for the first game was how much better he looks. He looks like he's shed 10 to 15 pounds. He looks fit. By all accounts, he came into this this season just better physically. And the word coming out of camp, out of Pacific's camp, is that maybe he's overcompensating, trying a little too hard. You know, that you can get into that mindset
Well, he's
where
living
things
in his
just aren't
own
falling.
shadow of what he did last year.
Exactly. I had questions about him last year. I'm still going to have questions about him going into 2021. But certainly an underperformance for sure.
Yeah, and those guys, we've seen sort of league veterans or people who have played in this league before, even the Kyle Beckers. I mean, Kyle Becker's a veteran of the game, but you've seen guys who succeeded last year who have come in and been stabilizing forces in their team when their team's maybe not necessarily playing, and particularly on the defensive side for Pacific. I think that would have really helped. But I just don't think that they had those stabilizers, and they didn't have those guys who brought that cohesion that they needed.